I'd like to really give you a good story because there's so many great stories I can share from real life experiences. I always change the names, for confidentiality reasons. But I'm just going to tell you a little story about somebody called John. And John was a pretty infrequent attender. I only saw him with a few kind of sports related injuries over the years, but he came in to see me and his face was just completely, expressionless. And he sat down and he just said, he didn't know what was wrong, but he just couldn't take it anymore. And he just felt completely exhausted. And when his girlfriend came in with him, who I knew better, and as she gently prompted him to really tell me what was really going on, he actually started to cry, Steve, which is something that, men don't do often, certainly in this part of the world. And he started speaking about, his sleep difficulties, how, he felt such a failure. I think that was his perception, that he felt that because of how he felt, that in some way he wasn't good enough, he didn't quite match up. And he lost his kind of zest or his mojo for life itself. And he was exhausted. It was like if you imagine him as being like a sponge, a wet sponge, that's John at his best. He'd been squeezed progressively drier until now there wasn't another drop of effort left to give. And it had come on, and I suppose often a classic situation. He worked in the corporate world, and he was always a hard worker, and he became noticed, and he was promoted, so he got more and more responsibility. And I suppose somewhere along the way, he just really became over agendaed. And you see it a lot, particularly with global corporations, when there's multiple time zones and then one member of a team goes down, and you're left taking on the additional team members' duties, and you keep doing that. And after a while, if you're neglecting your own self-care habits, which John did, you see, he stopped exercising, which is such a great way to recharge from stress. He had, he kind of gone back into his shell, which is kind of a classical stress response. You often see it in men, and he hadn't really been talking about how he felt. And, it just kind of crept up on him over a period of months, until really that day when he kind of snapped and he told his girlfriend that he couldn't take it anymore. And she was desperate and brought him to see me because she was really concerned he might do something. And of course, at its most severe form, burnout can lead to suicidal thoughts and a severe sort of depression. So John needed some time out from work. He needed to go to a therapist for some talking treatment, which was very, very helpful, because talking treatment can enable you to see things a little bit differently, to understand that your thoughts and perhaps the beliefs you have about those thoughts aren't always true, or they're not necessarily something you're stuck with. You can choose to see things a bit differently. And so he did that. And then I worked with John really, with some, what I would call some sustainable self-care strategies. So these would include, starting with a good night's sleep. So we work on a good sleep pattern. I'm not a fan of prescribing prescription sleeping tablets as such, because those things can cause side effects, and you can become tolerant, dependent, and addicted to them. But there are some kind of natural sleep aids that I would often recommend for people. I gave that to John. We got him to keep a written journal. That can be absolutely invaluable. It's a very old idea that the philosophers of old would have recommended, the idea of getting to know yourself, getting to write down how you felt emotionally. It's called emotional journaling. And, research has shown that it can be a wonderful way to allow you to have emotional catharsis, to get those emotions out on paper rather than suppressing or repressing how you feel. And that can build resilience and long-term well-being. It's such a simple idea, just writing down how you feel for 15, 20 minutes, 3 days in a row. But I also like to use a written journal to build a really keystone gratitude practice, because expressing gratitude, I find, can be a real antidote to feelings of toxic stress, to feelings of anxiety, to symptoms of burnout, to really appreciate how much you have to be grateful for and use that as a stepping stone to move forward in your life. As I say, gratitude can bring perspective to the past, a sense of peace to the present moment, and a profound sense of hope for the future. And speaking of the future, then I worked with John to look at what I would call his best possible future self, or even let's call it your better possible future self. What does 1 year out from now look like for John in terms of his health, in terms of his fitness, in terms of his relationships, in terms of his professional development, in terms of his life? So you get somebody, outside of themselves and moving forward into that better version of them. Exercise, the greatest pill of all for me. It's an absolutely keystone habit. We got John back into the gym, lifting weights. Weights release myokines, these hope molecules cross the blood-brain barrier to boost, mental well-being and build brain agility and resilience, and of course do so many great things to us physically as well in terms of our our cellular health and our mitochondrial capacity and so on. So people talk about food as medicine. I mean, I keep it really simple, just to eat real food, but just to be mindful about what you're eating and try and eat lots of color and lots of plants and lots of real food to really support your microbiome. And of course, going back to the Harvard study of adult development, probably the leading indicator of our well-being is the quality of our relationships. So to encourage John to reconnect with his friends and really to have some fun. And, John used to love playing tennis, and he got back playing that, and he explored paddle, which is becoming very, very popular now as well. And so he just started to have more downtime. And, after a period of time, he got back to work. He spoke to his HR director, who was very supportive. He changed his role. And, that was a couple of years ago. And John does check in with me still every few months, which I think is a very good idea, to check in when you're not necessarily feeling unwell, and just to keep on top of everything. Mm. And he's doing absolutely great. And in his own words, and this is no word of a lie, Steve, in his own words, John has told me that his burnout became his breakthrough. Yeah. His breakthrough to building a more resilient mind, his breakthrough to building sort of a richer emotional bank account, to learning to say no to the trivial stuff, to know what's important, to really value his friends. And also what's really interesting, as John got better and as John really, I suppose, developed a really new appreciation of his health, as he became, as I say, more of an active participant in his own well-being, he became an advocate. And this is wonderful. I love to see that, when somebody who's been through the trenches, as it were, comes out the other side. And John has become a great advocate for positive mental health and for positive health in general, in his community and also in his workplace, as a sort of a wellness champion. And, I think that's really testament to him and testament to his courage and commitment to accept, I suppose, that he needed to change, but to embrace the possibility of that change and move forward into that better version of him.